In this respect, the president of the ADB said that he had discussed with the President of the Republic the implementation of major structuring projects initiated in Algeria, citing notably two projects described as very important, namely the railway project linking Lerwad and Elminia worth $2.6 billion and the construction of a road linking Algeria and Mauritania.
We shared our views on two very important projects. There is a rail project that's going to cost $2.6 billion. It's a project that will link Lerwad to Nia, I think. It's a very important area. And there is also the road that will link Algeria to Mauritania. We talked about that. We also talked about the importance of phosphate. Many phosphate deposits have been discovered here and investment is needed. I assured His Excellency the President that the African Development Bank was ready to get involved. I would also stand by the country for this project. There are also other opportunities that we have discussed. But finally, what really touched me was the way in which His Excellency the President shared his views with me about his country, about his vision, about rural areas.
That was the President of the African Development Bank, Akinwumi Adesina. And the Islamic Development Bank Private Sector Forum has been held on the sidelines of the annual meetings of the Islamic Development Bank held here in Algiers under the theme Economic Diversification, Enriching Lives. Asia Bikar has more details in this report.
Speaking at the opening of the forum, Dr. Mohammed Al-Jasir, President of the Islamic Development Bank, said the Islamic Development Bank Private Sector Forum was a renewed strategic platform to leverage the innovative tools and services offered by the Islamic Development Bank Group institutions to support investment and trade and to foster partnership among member countries. He said the meeting offers a unique opportunity for investors, businessmen and CEOs from member countries to boost communication, establish partnerships and build trade relations with their counterparts in the Republic of Algeria. He also spoke about the financial contributions of the bank's institutions to supporting the private sector in member countries through financing and insurance.
This session provides a unique opportunity for investors, businessmen and senior executives from member countries to open communication channels, create partnerships and set up trade relations with their counterparts from the Republic of Algeria. The Islamic Corporation for the Insurance of Investment and Export Credit, ICIEC, provided an insurance coverage that exceeded $121 billion, which contributed to boosting strategic investment in private sectors, infrastructure, industry, medical care, agriculture and others. As for Islamic Corporation for the Development of the Private Sector, ICD, it has financed since its creation in 1999 more than 575 projects in 50 countries amounting to more than $7.5 billion in the sectors of financing, energy, industry and agriculture.
For his part, Algerian Finance Minister Abdelhakim Bouzerdes said the holding of the Private Sector Forum reflects the common interests of Algeria and the Islamic Development Bank to keep cooperating in boosting the private sector, notably by encouraging entrepreneurship. He also expressed Algeria's will to benefit from the expertise of the Islamic Development Bank in supporting the private sector.
Today's opening of this forum reflects our common will between Algeria and the Islamic Development Bank to enshrine cooperative relations, notably by supporting the private sector, entrepreneurship and encouraging the spirit of initiative, as well as accompanying the promotion of Algerian products for export on world markets. In this context, we welcome the contribution of the institutions of the Islamic Development Bank Group and hope to benefit from their leading experiences in supporting and financing the private sector.
Let's know that a panel discussion was held today here at the International Conference Center under the theme Boosting Intra-OIC Trade and Investment, Overcoming Barriers and Seizing Opportunities. The panel discussed investment opportunities in the Islamic Development Bank member countries while going through the challenges facing the investment growth and effective output. Asia Bakar to Radio Algeria International, the International Conference Center, Algiers.
The President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, has received the Ambassador of the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, Mr. Abdelkader Tarib Omar, who paid him a farewell visit at the end of his mission in Algeria. The meeting took place in the presence of the head of Office of the Presidency's Office of the Republic, Mr. Boualem Bouhlem, and the advisor to the President of the Republic in charge of diplomatic affairs, Mr. Ammar Abba. Mr. Talib praised Algeria's steadfast support for the Sahrawi cause over the decades, highlighting its loyalty to principles and brotherhood despite pressures, especially as the 52nd anniversary of the outbreak of the Sahrawi people's armed struggle.
I would like to commend and praise the broad support and great solidarity shown to the Sahrawi people by their brotherly Algerian people and by the Algerian state in general throughout the decades during which the Sahrawi people took refuge in Algerian land, the land of the 1.5 million martyrs, which stood by and defended their just cause over the past decades, especially as we now commemorate the 52nd anniversary of the founding of the front and the declaration of the armed struggle. Algeria has remained steadfast and unchanged. It has remained committed to those principles and to the bonds of brotherhood and friendship despite conspiracies and pressures. It has remained on the side of this just cause.
Earlier, the President of the Republic received the Ambassador of the Vatican, Mr. Kurian Matthew Vayaluncal, who paid him a visit at the end of his mission in Algeria. The meeting took place in the presence of the head of the Presidency's Office of the Republic, Mr. Boualem Bouhlem, and the advisor to the President of the Republic in charge of diplomatic affairs, Mr. Ammar Abba. And the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, has received here in Algiers the world-renowned writer and novelist known as Yasmina Khadra. The National Health Security Agency, chaired by Professor Kamel Senhaji, is taking part in the 78th World Assembly of the World Health Organization, which is being held in Geneva, Switzerland, until May 27, 2025, under the theme A World United for Health. Ms. Hodjarfi reports.
The session is a major step towards strengthening global health security with the adoption of an international agreement on pandemics, the fruit of lengthy multilateral negotiations that have led to a historic consensus reached between the member states. It will also focus on priority health issues such as the effects of climate change on health, mental health, tuberculosis, HIV/AIDS, and tobacco control, showing the diversity of public health challenges. The agreement on pandemics supports public health policies on prevention, particularly against tobacco, obesity, pollution, and trans fats. The discussions will highlight the WHO's efforts to develop universal health coverage, build human capacity, improve drug supply chain, and inaugurate the World Health Academy for international health skills training. Meanwhile, the international agreement on the prevention and control of pandemics was adopted after more than 3 years of negotiations. WHO's Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus hailed the agreement as a victory. Adopted by 124 votes, the resolution guarantees equitable access to health products in the event of a pandemic, a crucial point for the poorest countries. The agreement also strengthens surveillance and the One Health approach, human, animal, and environmental, despite complex negotiations on the sharing of data on pathogens and associated benefits such as vaccines and treatments.
And on behalf of the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, the State Minister in charge of Foreign Affairs, the National Community Abroad and African Affairs, Mr. Ahmed Hattaf, has arrived in Brussels, Belgium, to take part in the third meeting of Foreign Ministers of the African Union and the European Union scheduled for Wednesday. The meeting will assess the progress made in implementing the outcomes of the 6th AU-EU summit held in February 2022, particularly the efforts to reinforce the Africa-Europe partnership in key areas such as peace, security and sustainable development. It will also serve as a platform to discuss strategies for enhancing the effectiveness and momentum of this partnership, especially in preparation for the 7th AU-EU summit, which is expected to take place in an African country. Earlier, Mr. Attaf received Mohamedou Tunkara, Regional Director of the Global Green Growth Institute for MENA, to discuss prospects for cooperation as Algeria finalizes its accession to the organization with a focus on the environment, sustainable development and energy transition. Moving on, the situation in the Middle East, as the EU foreign ministers today met in Brussels to examine means of putting more pressure on Israel to force it to abide by its international obligations. The Israeli army has pursued its bombardments of Gaza, killing scores of Palestinians. The news agency Wafa stressed that about 50 people, mainly women and children, were killed in the continued bombardments of the territory. Meanwhile, the first lorries laden with aid have been allowed to enter the Gaza Strip for the first time since the Israeli authorities imposed a blockade on the territory last March. The announcement was made by a spokesman for the UN Coordination Office for Humanitarian Affairs, who stressed that 9 lorries had been authorized to enter Gaza, considering the move a drop in the ocean. Addressing the press in Geneva, the OCHA spokesman James Lurk affirmed that about 100 lorries had been allowed to enter Gaza, pending the distribution of aid to be ensured by existing system, which has already proven its efficiency. In this connection, UNRWA once again called for a lifting of the Israeli blockade, highlighting that the Israeli restrictions, including the displacement of the population, the continued bombardment of hospitals, schools, continue to fuel a dire humanitarian situation. It said that despair had gained momentum in Gaza, where families are striving to find food and basic supplies as famine threatens the territory. This came as the EU foreign ministers met to discuss the possible adoption of sanctions against Israel in the wake of the intensification of military operations in Gaza. They did not rule out the idea of suspending the partnership agreement reached between the EU and Israel and the adoption of sanctions targeting Israeli officials blamed for violations of the international humanitarian law. Earlier, France, the United Kingdom and Canada released a joint declaration reiterating their deep concerns at the escalation of violence in Gaza and urging the Israeli government to put a halt to its military operations and to allow in aid in conformity with the basic humanitarian principles. Back to national news, entrusted by the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, the Prime Minister, Mr. Nadir Herbawi, has presided over with the Higher Education Minister, Kamel Bedari, the first award ceremony for the President of the Republic's Prize for the Innovative Researcher held here in Algiers. During the ceremony marking the commemoration of the Student Day, 6 winners were awarded distinctions and prizes in the categories of innovative teachers, researchers, and students belonging to different research centers and universities and whose work covered several fields, notably artificial intelligence, the knowledge economy, and food and health safety. Donald Trump said after his call on Monday with President Vladimir Putin that Russia and Ukraine will immediately start negotiation for a ceasefire, but the Kremlin said the process would take time, and the US president indicated he was not ready to join Europe with fresh sanctions to pressure Moscow. Russia said that Ukraine had to decide whether or not it would cooperate in discussing a memorandum ahead of a potential future peace accord that Moscow had discussed with the United States. The EU and Britain announced new sanctions against Russia without waiting for the United States to join them after President Trump spoke to Vladimir Putin without winning a promise for a ceasefire in Ukraine. That's it for today's news bulletin. Stay tuned on Radio Algeria International.
Hello and welcome to our weekly program devoted to Algerian economic news.